Hello and welcome to today's story. In this episode, we will take you deep into the life of Xi Jinping, one of the most powerful and controversial leaders in the world. His story is not just about politics. It's a journey filled with struggles, survival, power, and control. Whether you admire him or question his leadership, one thing is certain. Xi Jinping's influence is massive, and his decisions shape the world we live in today. But how did he get here? How did a young boy born in a revolutionary family rise to control the world's second-largest economy? What challenges did he face? And why do so many people see him as both a strong leader and a feared dictator? Today, we will uncover every detail of his life, from his childhood, struggles, political rise, and his iron grip on China. We will also explore why he is one of the most controversial leaders of our time. And the best part? This story will not only give you deep knowledge about Xi Jinping, but will also help improve your English. As you listen to this engaging story, you will learn new words, sentence structures, and how to express complex ideas in simple English. So, if you're a beginner in English, don't worry. I will explain everything in an easy and interesting way. So, sit back, relax, and get ready for a powerful and eye-opening story. Part 1. Early life and family background. To understand Xi Jinping, we must first understand where he came from. His childhood was not like a normal child's. He was born into a life of privilege, but soon everything changed, and his life became a story of pain, survival, and political struggle. Xi Jinping was born on June 15, 1953, in Beijing, China. His father, Xi Jinping, was not an ordinary man. He was a revolutionary hero who fought alongside Mao Zedong, the founder of modern China. His mother, Qi Xin, was also involved in politics. At first, Xi Jinping's family was wealthy and powerful. His father was a high-ranking official in the Communist Party of China, CPC, and this gave young Xi a privileged life. He grew up in Zhongnanhai, a special area in Beijing where China's top leaders lived. His childhood was filled with servants, good food, and private schools. Everything seemed perfect. But in politics, power never lasts forever. In 1962, when Xi Jinping was just 9 years old, his world collapsed. His father, Xi Jinping, was accused of treason and removed from power by Mao Zedong's government. In China, when a politician falls, their entire family suffers. Xi's father was sent to prison, and suddenly, the family lost everything: their power, their money, and their home. Xi Jinping, once a privileged boy, became the son of a disgraced politician. But things got even worse. In 1966, China entered the Cultural Revolution, a period of chaos where Mao Zedong encouraged young people to attack anyone who was considered anti-communist. This included teachers, intellectuals, and the families of fallen politicians, like Xi Jinping's family. At the age of 13, Xi Jinping saw his family humiliated and attacked in public. His home was raided, his mother was forced to denounce his father, and his elder sister couldn't handle the pressure and took her own life. But the worst part? Xi Jinping himself was labeled an enemy of the Communist Party. Because of his family's fall from power, Xi Jinping was sent to the countryside at the age of 15 as part of Mao's policy called Down to the Countryside movement. This policy forced educated city kids to live and work in rural areas so they could learn the hard life of peasants. For the next 7 years, Xi Jinping lived in a poor village called Liangjiahe in Shanxi province. Imagine this. A boy who once lived in luxury now had to sleep in a cave. work in the fields, and struggle for food. His life was extremely hard. He woke up at sunrise and worked in the fields all day. He carried heavy loads of wheat and dug ditches for irrigation. He slept in a small, dark cave with no electricity. He suffered from lice, extreme cold, and hunger. During this time, Xi Jinping learned how to survive. He later said, "The hardships of rural life gave me strong discipline and shaped who I am today." But despite the suffering, Xi Jinping never gave up. While others cried and waited for the government to rescue them, he adapted to the tough life and made himself stronger. Xi Jinping knew one thing. If he wanted to escape poverty, he had to return to politics. But it wasn't easy. His father was still seen as a traitor, and no university or political organization wanted to accept him. So he tried to join the Communist Party of China, CPC. And guess what? He was rejected. 7 times. Yes, 7 times. The Communist Party rejected his application because of his father's past. But Xi Jinping didn't quit. He kept applying again and again, until finally, in 1974, at the age of 21, he was accepted into the Communist Party. This was a huge moment in his life. From being a peasant, he had now entered the world of power. But this was only the beginning. Part 2. Xi Jinping's rise in politics, from nobody to power. After spending 7 years in the countryside in Liangjiahe, Xi Jinping was determined to become an important politician. But he knew one thing. In China's Communist Party, you can't rise quickly unless you prove your loyalty and patience. So instead of rushing to the top, he started from a very low-level government job. In 1979, he got his first real job as a personal secretary to Geng Biao, a senior military official in Beijing. At this time, China was not yet a superpower. The country was still recovering from the Cultural Revolution, and many leaders were trying to rebuild the economy and the military. Even though being a secretary might sound small, it was an important learning experience for Xi. He got the chance to meet important people in the government, observe military decisions, and learn the inner workings of power. However, Xi Jinping didn't want to stay as a secretary forever. He wanted to build his own political career. So, in 1982, he requested a transfer to a small rural province called Hebei, where he became the deputy party secretary of Zhengding County. Many people in Beijing were shocked. Why would someone leave the capital city to work in a small, poor area? But Xi Jinping was playing the long game. He knew that the Communist Party valued leaders who had experience working in rural areas. He wanted to show that he could work at the lowest levels of government before rising to the top. In Hebei, Xi Jinping worked day and night. He visited farmers, promoted economic projects, and built a reputation as a hard-working and humble leader. He was slowly proving himself to the Communist Party. But this was just the beginning of his strategy. After gaining experience in Hebei, Xi Jinping moved to Fujian province in 1985. This was a major turning point because Fujian was located near Taiwan, and it was becoming a key area for China's economic reforms. In 1987, Xi Jinping married Peng Liyuan, a famous singer in China. 5 years later, in 1992, they had a daughter, Xi Mingzi, who later studied at Harvard University under a pseudonym to protect her privacy. For the next 17 years, Xi Jinping held various government positions in Fujian, including Vice Mayor of Xiamen, 1985 to 1988, Deputy Secretary of Fujian, 1995 to 2000, Governor of Fujian, 2000 to 2002. During this time, China was rapidly modernizing, and Fujian was one of the fastest-growing regions. Xi Jinping focused on economic development, attracting foreign investment, and improving infrastructure. More importantly, he built strong connections with China's business and political elite. He learned how to balance economic growth with party loyalty, a skill that would later help him rise to the top. However, his time in Fujian was not without controversies. During the 1990s, many Chinese government officials were involved in corruption, accepting bribes, helping businesses in exchange for money, and using government funds for personal gain. In Fujian, a major scandal broke out in the late 1990s, involving a smuggling operation worth $6 billion. Many government officials were caught and punished, but Xi Jinping remained untouched. Some believe he was too careful and avoided corruption, while others think he knew how to protect himself from political enemies. Either way, this scandal did not stop his rise. In fact, his reputation as a clean and disciplined leader helped him get promoted. By 2002, he was ready for the next big step in his career, a move that would bring him one step closer to ruling China. In 2002, Xi Jinping was transferred to Zhejiang province, one of China's most economically important regions. This was a major test for him. If he succeeded here, he would be considered for national leadership. As the party's secretary of Zhejiang, he focused on encouraging private businesses, reducing government corruption, improving infrastructure and foreign investments. Zhejiang was already a rich province, but Xi Jinping made it even stronger. His policies helped businesses grow, and his reputation as a no-nonsense leader continued to rise. But just as Xi Jinping was solidifying his power, a major political event happened in Beijing, one that would change his life forever. In 2007, a major political shakeup happened in China. The Communist Party was preparing for the next big leadership transition. President Hu Jintao was stepping down, and China needed a new leader. Two main figures were being considered. 1. Li Keqiang, the candidate supported by Hu Jintao. 2. Xi Jinping, a surprise choice backed by powerful political families. At the last moment, the party chose Xi Jinping as the next leader of China. Why? Because unlike other politicians, Xi Jinping had a strong political background. His father was a revolutionary hero. Experience working in multiple provinces. A clean image with no direct corruption scandals. Support from China's most powerful families. In 2007, Xi Jinping was promoted to Vice President of China. This meant that in just 5 years, he would take full control of the country. But even though he had won the leadership battle, his biggest challenge was yet to come: how to maintain absolute power once he became president. Part 3. Xi Jinping's road to absolute power. Becoming China's supreme leader. Being vice president was not enough. He wanted total power. When Xi Jinping became vice president in 2007, many people believed he would be just another leader, a safe and moderate politician who wouldn't change much. But behind the scenes, Xi Jinping was carefully preparing for his rise to absolute power. At that time, China was ruled by a group of powerful leaders. No single person had full control. Decisions were made collectively by a group of high-ranking politicians called the Politburo Standing Committee. Xi Jinping knew that if he wanted complete control, he had to eliminate all his political rivals, one by one. Step 1. Studying his opponents. Before making any move, Xi Jinping spent years studying his enemies. He wanted to know who was corrupt, who had scandals, who had too much power, who was loyal to him. He acted humble and quiet, pretending to be a leader who didn't want trouble. But inside, he was planning a massive political attack. In 2012, just 1 year before Xi Jinping was supposed to become China's new president, a shocking scandal changed everything. A powerful politician named Bo Xilai, who was also trying to become China's next leader, was caught in a massive corruption and murder scandal. Bo Xilai's wife, Gu Kailai, was accused of murdering a British businessman named Neil Haywood. The scandal was huge. It exposed deep corruption inside China's leadership. Xi Jinping saw this as his perfect opportunity. Using this scandal, he convinced China's leaders that corruption was a serious problem and that he was the only one who could clean up the system. This made him look like an honest leader, a man who could bring discipline back to the Communist Party. In November 2012, Xi Jinping officially became China's new president. But now that he had power, he faced one big problem: how to keep it forever. As soon as Xi Jinping became president, he launched one of the biggest political purges in modern history. He called it the Anti-Corruption Campaign, but in reality, it was a way to remove his enemies. How did the purge work? Step 1. Accuse a powerful politician of corruption. Step 2. Launch an investigation, but the result was already decided. Step 3. Arrest them, remove them from power, or even sentence them to death. This campaign was massive. Over 1.5 million government officials were investigated. Many top leaders disappeared overnight. Some were sent to prison, while others were never seen again. Xi Jinping didn't stop at politicians. He also purged generals in the military, CEOs of major companies, and even celebrities. By 2014, he had eliminated almost all of his political enemies. Now there was no one left to challenge him. But just removing enemies wasn't enough. He needed to make sure no one would ever challenge him again. To secure his power, Xi Jinping took an unusual step. He started building a personality cult, just like Mao Zedong did in the past. This meant that the government began promoting Xi Jinping as the greatest leader, publishing books about his wisdom, making school children memorize his quotes, placing his face on giant posters everywhere. He also introduced a new political philosophy called Xi Jinping thought, which became mandatory learning in schools and government offices. This was a clear message. Xi Jinping was no longer just a leader. He was becoming a supreme ruler. But then came his biggest and most controversial move. In 2018, Xi Jinping did something that no leader had done since Mao Zedong. He removed the two-term limit for the Chinese presidency. Before this, every Chinese president had to step down after 2 terms, 10 years total. But Xi Jinping changed the constitution, allowing him to stay in power for life. This was a huge moment in Chinese history. For many people, it confirmed their biggest fear. Xi Jinping was not just a president anymore. He was becoming a dictator. This decision made him one of the most powerful leaders in the world, but it also made him one of the most controversial figures in modern history. Part 4. Xi Jinping, the global power struggle, controlling China and challenging the West. But having absolute power inside China was not enough. Now he wanted China to become the most powerful country in the world, and that meant challenging the West, especially the United States. For years, the United States was the most powerful country in the world, the strongest economy, the biggest military, the leader in technology. But Xi Jinping wanted China to replace the US as the world's #1 superpower. So he focused on three things. 1. Expanding China's economy. 2. Strengthening China's military. 3. Controlling technology and information. 1. Expanding China's economy. The Belt and Road. Strategy. Xi Jinping knew that money equals power. If China wanted to dominate the world, it needed to control global trade. So in 2013, he launched the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, the biggest international infrastructure project in history. China gave billions of dollars in loans to other countries. It built highways, railways, ports, and airports across Asia, Africa, and Europe. It helped poor countries, but also trapped them in debt, making them dependent on China. By 2020, over 140 countries had joined this project. Some people called it a great investment for the future. Others called it a way for China to secretly take control of the world. But one thing was clear: Xi Jinping had made China the center of global trade. 2. Strengthening China's military. Xi Jinping knew that money alone wasn't enough. China also needed a powerful military. He expanded China's army, making it the biggest in the world. He developed hypersonic missiles, which could travel faster than sound. He built artificial islands in the South China Sea and turned them into military bases. This was a direct challenge to the United States and its allies. Countries like Japan, India, and the Philippines became nervous. They saw China's military expansion as a threat. And Xi Jinping made one thing clear: China will take back Taiwan, even if it means war. This increased tensions with the US, which had always supported Taiwan's independence. Many experts started saying a future war between the US and China was becoming more and more possible. 3. Controlling technology. The Great Firewall and Surveillance. Xi Jinping understood that information is power. If he controlled the internet, he could control what people think. If he controlled technology, he could control the world's future. So he expanded China's censorship system, known as the Great Firewall. Websites like Google, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram were completely banned in China. Only government-approved information was allowed. People who criticized the government online were arrested or disappeared. But he didn't stop there. He also created the world's most advanced surveillance system. Millions of CCTV cameras were installed across China. Facial recognition AI was used to track people everywhere they went. A social credit system was introduced. If you followed government rules, you got rewards. If you criticized the government, you got punished. For many people, China was starting to look like a real-life Big Brother state from George Orwell's novel 1984. Supporters said, "It keeps China safe and stable." Critics said, "It is the most advanced dictatorship in the world." But the biggest test of Xi Jinping's leadership was about to come: COVID-19. In late 2019, a mysterious virus was discovered in Wuhan, China. At first, the Chinese government tried to hide the outbreak. Doctors who spoke about the virus were silenced. Journalists who reported on it disappeared. China refused to give full information to the world. By the time the truth came out, COVID-19 had already spread globally. Many countries blamed China for not acting fast enough. The US, Europe, and Australia accused China of hiding the virus's origins. Some even suggested the virus might have leaked from a lab in Wuhan. This made Xi Jinping even more controversial. Was China responsible for the pandemic? To control the situation, Xi Jinping introduced extreme lockdowns. Millions of people were locked in their homes for months. Anyone testing positive was forced into government quarantine centers. Protests broke out as people became angry at the government's strict rules. China's economy suffered massively, but Xi Jinping refused to change his strategy. For many, this showed his obsession with total control, even at the cost of his people's well-being. Part 5. Xi Jinping, facing rebellion, economic crisis, and the fight to stay in power. When the COVID-19 pandemic began, most countries had strict lockdowns in the beginning, but later they reopened their economies and learned to live with the virus. But Xi Jinping refused to do the same. Instead, he introduced the Zero COVID policy, which was the strictest lockdown system in the world. Entire cities were locked down for months, even if only a few cases were detected. People were trapped in their homes without enough food or medical help. If someone tested positive, they were forcibly taken to government quarantine centers. Drones and robot dogs patrolled the streets, warning people to stay inside. For 2 years, Chinese people suffered under these extreme policies. Businesses closed. Millions lost jobs. People became frustrated and angry. And then, the breaking point happened. In November 2022, a tragedy in Urumqi, Xinjiang, sparked nationwide outrage. A fire broke out in an apartment building, and 10 people burned to death because China's lockdown restrictions had blocked the doors and exits. People across China finally snapped. They had suffered in silence for too long. Thousands of people poured into the streets, holding blank sheets of white paper, a symbol of protest against Xi Jinping's censorship. This movement, called the White Paper Protests, was shocking because China's people rarely protest against the government. Some protesters even called for Xi Jinping to step down, a crime punishable by life in prison. It spread across major cities, Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, and more. For the first time, Xi Jinping looked vulnerable. How did he respond? At first, he ignored the protests, hoping they would die out. But secretly, he made a shocking decision. He suddenly ended the Zero COVID policy. This was highly unusual. Xi Jinping never changes his mind. But this time, he was forced to retreat because he knew the protests could grow into something bigger. For decades, China's economy was growing at an unbelievable speed. Massive factories, huge infrastructure projects, billions of dollars in trade. Millions of people lifted out of poverty. China became the second largest economy in the world. But by 2023, everything was starting to slow down. And people began to wonder, was China's economic miracle coming to an end? For years, China's real estate market was booming. Developers built thousands of new apartment buildings. Investors bought properties, thinking prices would always go up. Banks gave out billions in loans. But there was one big problem. Most of these buildings were never actually used. Millions of apartments sat empty, creating China's infamous ghost cities. People couldn't afford to buy homes. Developers ran out of money and stopped construction halfway. By 2023, major companies like Evergrande, one of the largest property developers in China, collapsed under massive debt. Millions of people lost their life savings. Investors pulled money out of China. The economy began to crash. For Xi Jinping, this was a disaster. The real estate market was one of the main drivers of China's economy, and now it was falling apart. For years, Chinese students were told to study hard, go to university, and they would have a great future. But by 2023, something shocking happened. Millions of young people couldn't find jobs. Over 20% of Chinese youth were unemployed, the highest in history. Graduates with degrees couldn't get even basic jobs. Many young people gave up on their dreams and returned to farming or manual labor. This was a huge embarrassment for Xi Jinping because his government had promised prosperity. But now the younger generation was losing hope. More young people became critical of the government, blaming Xi Jinping's policies. The situation was getting worse, not better. For years, Xi Jinping ruled with fear. Nobody dared to challenge him. But by 2023, some cracks started appearing inside the Communist Party. Some leaders were secretly unhappy with Xi Jinping's extreme policies. They blamed him for the economic slowdown and protests. There were rumors of secret power struggles happening behind closed doors. One mysterious incident in 2023 shocked China. Defense Minister Li Shangfu disappeared. He was a high-ranking military official and a close ally of Xi Jinping. One day, he vanished without explanation. The government refused to talk about it. After securing his position as China's most powerful leader, Xi Jinping turned his attention to the world. His dream was clear: to make China the strongest country on earth. But this was not an easy task. The United States was already the world's superpower, and competition between the two nations became intense. Xi knew that China could not defeat the US with weapons, so he used a different strategy: an economic and technological war. Trade war. In 2018, US President Donald Trump placed heavy taxes on Chinese products. Xi responded by doing the same to American products, causing tension between the two nations. Huawei controversy. The US accused Huawei, a Chinese tech giant, of spying and banned it. Many countries followed, damaging China's tech industry. Chip war. China depends on advanced computer chips from the US. But the US blocked exports, making it difficult for China to develop its technology. TikTok concerns. Many Western countries believe TikTok, a Chinese-owned app, was stealing user data. The US threatened to ban it, but China refused to give up control. Xi Jinping was fighting multiple battles at once. But this was just the beginning. Taiwan became another major issue. China considers Taiwan a part of its territory, but Taiwan sees itself as independent. The US supports Taiwan, selling it weapons and military technology. Xi increased military pressure, sending Chinese fighter jets near Taiwan. Many feared that if China invaded Taiwan, a global war with the US could begin. Despite these risks, Xi was determined to show the world that China was powerful and fearless. Inside China, Xi built one of the world's most controlled societies. As I mentioned before, Google, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram are banned due to internet censorship. The government controls what people can see online. Surveillance everywhere. Millions of security cameras watch people using facial recognition to track movements. If someone criticizes the government, their score drops, affecting travel, loans, and job opportunities. Media control. Newspapers and TV channels cannot say anything negative about Xi Jinping. Xi was not just a leader, he was controlling every part of life in China. Even though Xi had great power, not everyone supported him. Communist Party divisions. Some Communist Party members believed he was making too many enemies. Corrupt officials turned against him. When Xi removed corrupt politicians, some secretly planned to bring him down. Rich businessmen feared him. Billionaires like Jack Ma suddenly disappeared after criticizing the government. Many believed Xi was removing anyone who opposed him. Part 7. The Final Chapter. The Future of Xi Jinping and China. Xi Jinping has led China through massive changes, but now new challenges threaten his leadership. Will he continue to shape China's future, or will his rule face unexpected problems? Under Xi's rule, China became more powerful but also more controlled. Strict laws. Universities were forced to follow government guidelines, and businesses lost their independence. Advanced technology. China became a leader in AI, space research, and robotics, but its government used technology for total control. China became a digital fortress where every citizen was watched. But despite this control, one thing remained unpredictable: the people. Not everyone in China agreed with Xi's strict policies. Young people felt frustrated with strict government rules. Students and intellectuals started questioning Xi's leadership. Small acts of resistance appeared, with people using secret messages to criticize the government. Xi responded with force: arrests, internet censorship, and military crackdowns. But no leader can control people forever. China's relationship with other countries became more complicated. The US-China rivalry intensified, with disputes over trade and technology. Many countries stopped accepting Chinese investments, fearing too much Chinese influence. China formed alliances with Russia, Iran, and North Korea, challenging Western powers. But was China gaining allies or isolating itself from the world's most powerful economies? Xi Jinping's decisions have shaped China in ways that will be felt for generations. But how will history judge him? Will he be remembered as the leader who made China stronger? Or will he be seen as a dictator who restricted freedom? Only time will tell. Xi Jinping's rule continues, and the world is watching. His choices will determine not only China's future, but also the future of global politics. What do you think? Is Xi a visionary leader or a ruthless ruler? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more interesting content. Stay tuned for more amazing stories.